And if you stop and take the time to study American feudal land systems, take and look at the Van Rensselaerwick, the patroons of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, New England. I'm not talking about Old England. I'm talking about New England. And if you examine the North Way, this is where it gets really interesting. Examine the North Way from New York City to Montreal, and then examine the North Way from London to York that ran right through the Sherwood Forest. They even named Route 87 in New York, New England, the North Way. They named it after the forest preservation unit set-asides of the Royal Kingdom that run right through Sherwood Forest. Ha ha ha, it's pretty funny, isn't it, folks? Old Rockefeller, Hawkschild, and the Hawkschilds, excuse me, Rockefeller, Hawkschild, the Rothschilds, the DuPonts, the Astors, all the royalty of America that set up these environmental forest set-asides, you know, national parks and state parks, all this park system, all these parks that they're establishing all over the United States, like the new monument, national monument they want to put in Oregon, bigger than Yellowstone. You know, this is all how the royals take over land. This is how they're imposing Agenda 21. This is how they're imposing the New World Order. This is how they're imposing the United Nations, all under the auspices of environmentalism. Now, if you take a look at the writings of Mother Jones News, and you take a look into who owns the Mother Jones News, and that would be Mr. Hawkschild and the Hawkschild mining family, the Hawkschild mining family, American Metals. And they're all in cahoots with the Rothschild Natural Resources Corporation and all these other British and Dutch and French-based mining companies that are mining the West, like British Dutch Shell, you know, that are drilling for oil and gas in the wildlife refuges up in Alaska. They're drilling for oil and gas and minerals and all the other valuable stuff that's in the ground and the wildlife refuges all over the United States. The mining of the national park system, the mining and the oil and gas drilling and the extraction of the rare earth materials that are going on all over the United States in these forest unit set-aside preservation parks. The exact same programs that established Sherwood Forest. Sorry, folks, that's just the reality of it. You're being flim-flam. You're being flim-flam by the new empire. You know, the Empire State of New York. I'm not talking about Old York. I'm talking about New York and the American Empire. How many times have you heard about America's royal families, like the Kennedys and the Bushes and the Clintons and the Obamas, and I can go out of the Waters and the, you know, Feinsteins and all the royal poobahs of the American Empire. Don't let them kid you, folks. And to my little friends in that wildlife refuge in Burns, I really have to be kind of proud of when Ammon said that all the wealth comes from the ground. The Bundys know where wealth comes from. Golden Butte, Colorado. Steens, the Hammonds darn sure know. Hammonds live right on the base of the Steen Mountain Range. The BLM damn sure knows. And the Bureau of the Interior certainly knows. And the United States Geological Survey, U.S. Congress, the Senate, the President, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the CIA, the NSA, The IRS, the U.S. Treasury, they all know that the treasure is in the ground. That's why you've got all these giant land grabs going on and these environmental preservation programs all over the Adirondacks, all over the Catskills, all over the Blue Mountains, the White Mountains, the Smoky Mountains, the Boston Mountains, the Ozark Mountains, the Wasatch Mountains, the Rockies, the Sierras, the Olympics, and I can go on and on and on and on and on all over the world. And the Hochschild owned and operated Mother Jones News. That's Hochschild Mining. Mother Jones News. Hochschild Mining. You see, folks, up in the Adirondacks, the Hochschilds and the Rothschild Natural Resources Corporation of the Rothschild banking empire, they finance and promote and support and provide all kinds of assistance to these artisan groups that take up in these wildlife refuge towns, and they engage in art and music, and they write, and they're wildlife photographers, and they're poets, and you know, they've got this entire industry going on of people being paid and supported by these giant mining corporations to engage in all this save the birds and the bees. And oh, we got to have parks and wildlife refuges. And then they go on with their photography and writing their articles about environmentalism and how grand and great Agenda 2030, Agenda 21, and all these other environmental, you know, Ducks Unlimited, the Sierra Club, folks, the environmental preservation trusts. There's huge amounts of money in them buying the land first and holding on to it for a few years, then marking it up, and a bunch of and of course they finance what they sell to the government. They make huge amounts of interest from the sales because the states always pay for it on a credit card. And if you think I'm fooling around, examine the land acquisition programs of New York, the Empire State. Now, why are people afraid to speak up? Well, I watched them target my mother and father. I watched them take my mother and father down. They stole everything that my mother and father ever built and ever worked for. And they had help from the locals in Warren County, New York. Some of the people that are in ownership of my parents' estate at Harris Bay on Lake George, New York. And to my Mormon friends, I'm talking about the Harrises. You know, Martin Harris, the Smith cousins. I grew up on Harris Bay. That going out to the Bundys. I grew up north of Harrisina along the Ridge Road in Queensbury, New York. That's going to the Bundys and to the Hammonds and to everybody standing up with them. I'm a Witham. Kind of funny, isn't it? Robin Hood was written at Witham Abbey, at a Corinthian monastery, by monks to speak out and stand up and expose the royal forest set-aside programs of the English crown. This is ancient DNA. I come from an ancient family. I even look like I belong in Sherwood Forest, maybe. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it right there. Enjoy all my writings. I've been writing and posting, and I've made over 600 videos. I've been writing about these land swindling cons, and I've been fighting since 1982. There's the Courier article from October 19th, 1986 by Lucy Proctor, Hoisting the Flags. I don't know what more proof you want. And to Dave Ward, Sheriff Dave Ward, you know, there's 40 million militia across the United States, Dave. 40 million. And they've got Oregon surrounded. And everybody's watching. Sheriff Dave Ward, everybody realizes the dirty little scandal that's been going on in Harney County for a long time, where there's all the kickbacks and the federal grant monies, and everybody's living cushy and high on the hog, getting the kickbacks from the Department of the Interior and BLM and, all the Justice Department programs that fund your sheriff's office. How you're getting along just swimmingly with the empire, Dave Ward. So I want you to understand something, that when a family like the Hammonds accidentally lets a fire get out of control, when they're, setting a backfire to try to save their farm, their ranch, they didn't intentionally burn anything, Sheriff Dave Ward. It was an accident. It was negligence, maybe. I'm going to agree with the federal senior judge that sentenced the Hammonds originally. I'm agreeing with the senior federal district judge on this one, Dave Ward. And I suggest, Dave Ward, you find you a quiet place and get down on your hands and knees and you pray to God in heaven that the truth and all the truth and the whole truth is completely exposed, because that's what 40 million American militia are working very hard to do. And I don't think history will be very kind to anyone that has conspired against the people, not only of Oregon, not only of New York State, but all over this nation, where people have been suckered and set up by people who are more interested in their checking account balances and how much money that the feds can direct towards their law enforcement programs. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, we're going to leave it right there. Hasta la vista. We will be back. Don't forget Hoisting the Flags. It's a really interesting article and proof, absolute proof, that this descendant of the Withams of Witham, England, along the Witham River, where that Witham Abbey stood and where Robin Hood was written, this Witham, I've got so much proof and evidence that the United States has been swindled for trillions. It is absolutely mind-blowing. Leave it right there, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for your time.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Witham Judson, or Judson Witham. And that was a very interesting conversation, wasn't it? He has a lot to say, and I think he should be heard, because you know what? He's been banned from YouTube. He's a YouTube outlaw. Anyway, this is Call of Duty Goddess, and as always, I've got your 6.